Hi everyone, DanIsStoned here, and today, on the day of this recording, so on the 25th of April, we are precisely 1 year to the day from the debut launch of Paradox Interactive's newest grand strategy game, Imperator Rome. Paradox Interactive is a Swedish-based game developer and publisher who is behind a growing list of grand strategy games that we have all come to know and love, with the likes of the much acclaimed Crusader Kings 2 and Europa Universalis 4 the standout successes of the studio in recent times, in what is a small and relatively niche gaming market with an incredibly passionate community. Now, with the game officially a year old, I thought we would take a look at the trajectory that the game has taken since launch day 1, right up to the actual and current state of the game, all while looking at what we can expect from the game in the future. Now let's get started on the good, the bad and the future of Imperator Rome. Before we delve into the topic, I just want to remind everyone that this video is in no way, shape or form destined to be just one long line of critical rhetoric berating the game, nor is it going to be a totally biased video praising the game from A to Z. For those who follow the channel, you will know that Imperator Rome is a game that I have played a lot and consistently since launch, and that I had and still have a lot of fun playing. That does not mean, however, that I don't think the game could have been made better or that things could have been done differently. Quite the opposite. There are a lot of things that I think are wrong and could be improved, but that is a topic for another video. This production will, or at least try to be to a certain extent, as objective as I can be and deconstruct fairly and analytically why the game has not received support from the wider playing community that other Paradox titles have had, and what the developers have done post-launch to improve the game as they try to fix its shortcomings in an attempt to get things back on track. First of all, for those who don't know what the game is, it is essentially in a nutshell a grand strategy game merging state management with character interaction thrown into the mix as well. The game is primarily centred around the classical Mediterranean world, allowing you to take control of a nation from around 304 BC right up to the foundation of the Roman Empire in 27 BC by Augustus. As the name of the game suggests, the flagship nation for the title is evidently the Roman Republic. Now, we all know that the game has suffered from a pretty rough launch, with the Paradox community making their feelings towards this instalment in Paradox's niche portfolio particularly well known, with the main grievances being lack of content, no diversity between nations, the mana system, mediocre naval combat, and much more. The list goes on, and I could do a whole video on this topic. The game went from a large and respectable 29,000 concurrent players and plummeted to a measly 1,600 players on average only 1.5 months post-launch, and it's pretty much remained at this average ever since, bar some small growth spikes related to the releases of major updates and content packs that thus far has managed to only temporarily raise the number of players before falling back to its meagre average. Now, compared to Paradox's better known games like Europa Universalis 4 and CK2, Imperator Rome, player rating and player count wise, has thus far been a train wreck, and a pretty major one at that. All this despite promising game sales that surpass Paradox's expectations. Despite these promising signs just after launch with a high player count, things quickly started to turn sour, with a large portion of players fast seeking refunds and overwhelmingly negative reviews being posted on Steam. Crusader Kings 2, a game that was released in 2012, that's 8 years ago, currently has on average 11,500 current players. That's more than 5 times that of Imperator Rome at this point in time. And Europa Universalis 4, which was released in 2013, has a whopping 25,000 average concurrent players. That's more than 12 times that of Imperator. You can argue a case that EU4 and CK2 have had 7 to 8 years of extra development and content added on to get up to that level, and they also had pre-existing foundations to build on, and that like Imperator, their launch was also far from perfect. But again, this is a topic for another video. The underlying fact is that even at launch and beyond, both of the games never even got close to Imperator Rome's low current player count, and nowhere near the all-time low of around 600 concurrent players. This is an incredibly low player count and poses a serious existential threat for the game, as no game developer would continue to support a game with such low numbers. Following the community backlash, Paradox in my opinion had 2 options. Option 1, they could either fold and write the whole thing off, a scenario that would have been highly unlikely considering the time, effort and finances that the company puts into their games, notably post-launch in the form of updates and DLC. Or, secondly, they could take into account the player and community feedback and try to fix/improve the game based on what the players are looking for. It's a good job that Paradox chose the latter, and 2 months after the game's release they brought out the Pompey update, which significantly improved naval warfare. It was also a free update, breaking away from the traditional paid content normally released as the first update or DLC for their games. I would speculate, and I repeat speculate, that this was done to satisfy the current players at the time, all while trying to bring back old players who ditched the game after launch and potentially attract new ones. I have a feeling that if the first update was in the form of a paid DLC, the uproar would have been massive. Pre-Pompey, naval warfare was highly monotonous, with only one type of ship available, and the outcome of naval battles being decided by the martial ability of the admiral in charge and the different modifiers that you gained through inventions. Pompey brought different ship types and naval tactics that diversified this aspect of the game, thus transforming naval combat to less about who had more ships to those who had a better naval composition and tactic, making naval warfare more impactful. But this update was nothing compared to the next free update released, which overhauled the game significantly and what is, in my opinion, the largest single update ever done by Paradox. It didn't just change the game, it revamped core gameplay mechanics in their entirety, effectively changing the makeup of the game. Cicero landed on the 29th of October 2019. Gone was the mana system, so hated by players, which was now condensed into two distinct resources, political influence and military experience. Pop mechanics were also changed, becoming more dynamic. No longer did you have to spend mana to instantly move, assimilate or convert pops at the simple click of a button. Even though the pop concept was brought over from Stellaris, which in turn was taken from Victoria 2, I think it's a fantastic addition and a concept which is absolutely brilliant. However, the fact that pops were not dynamic in their movement and evolution was a major drawback. Cicero makes pops more fluid and organic, meaning that pops move, assimilate and convert over time, which in turn increases the feeling that the world is a living, breathing and moving space. All this makes the player more attached to the nation they are playing as, while at the same time making the ancient world more vibrant, more real and ultimately more enjoyable. Territories were also redesigned, dividing the areas on the map into two types of locations, settlements and cities. This small but major change gave players more territorial variety, establishing a difference between cities that concentrate people, like in real life by the way, and settlements, rural locations where the pop count is lower. Cicero also brought us the food mechanic, which is tightly linked to pops, and changed the way that land warfare is conducted in the game. Each province produced a certain amount of food, meaning that pops now had to be fed in order for territories to thrive. Armies also needed to be fed on campaign. Troops would now carry a certain amount of food with them depending on their size, and a new unit was implemented, the supply train, which increases the amount of food an army could carry with them. If an army's food supply reached zero, then it would suffer massive losses from starvation. Next came the Livy update and the Punic Wars DLC, the first paid content for the game. Both hit Steam on the 3rd of December 2019, only 2 months after the major Cicero patch. Livy aimed to tackle the blandness of the game, hoping to create some uniqueness for the different nations of the game by implementing EU4 style mission trees. Now, I have to admit I was quite skeptical about mission trees, not being a big fan of them in EU4 because they forced the player down a certain path, making them play a certain way, thus creating a similar playstyle for a nation no matter how many times you play the said country. You can always choose to ignore the missions, but the bonus gained from them, they were usually so good and it compelled you to go down that path. The missions for the major nations were scripted, giving them additional flavour, and that was the case with the DLC The Punic Wars, giving additional flavour and content to the game's main protagonist, Rome, and its arch-rival Carthage, making both nations less bland. However, for all the other nations, the mission trees were very generic, only having a certain mission type such as conquer a said region and then develop it. But I hope that over time, Paradox will expand on these types of missions and make even more of these so-called said generic missions so that we don't only ever see the same type of objectives available. I also realise that making scripted missions for every nation is pretty much near impossible and will demand time and resources aplenty. So the only real solution here is for the minor nations are the generic trees, but I feel the trick here will be to try and create a set of missions, albeit generic, that will not force players down a certain route and style of play. The only way I can see to avert this is to not make the mission rewards so powerful that the player feels compelled to complete the said objective like in EU4, all while finding the right balance that incites the player to go down a mission tree to get a reward he might need at a specific time. The key here, in my humble opinion, is adaptability and flexibility, with missions that can organically fluctuate depending on the player's needs at a particular point in time. But enough on missions, I could spend forever on how to improve this aspect. The most recent update is the Archimedes patch, which rolled out with the Magna Graecia DLC pack, which gave the Hellenistic nations around Greece and Magna Graecia scripted missions, just like the Punic Wars DLC. Again, due to time constraints, I will not go into detail about the DLC. It's pretty much similar to what the Punic Wars DLC did, adding flavour to the target nations. However, the major change was brought with Archimedes update, which was free. It effectively made religion less bland, and you can now see a common trend with all these changes. A lot of it revolves around diversity and flavour for the different nations, making the said countries less bland and similar, progressively making each campaign feel slightly less similar to the previous one, even though there is still a long way to go. I won't go into detail on religion here, again for the sake of time, but feel free to go and check out the Archimedes guide I did a while back, the link will be in the description below. Despite a rocky launch and low player count, Imperator Rome has evolved quite a bit since its launch 1 year ago on the 25th of April 2019. Paradox seemed to have listened to community feedback and brought the changes demanded by the community, the removal of mana being the most demanded one of all. But what does the future hold for Imperator? Well, the developers have released a roadmap for what arrives after Archimedes, with the next update, Menander, focusing on culture, which again I suppose means more cultural diversity and flavour added to the game. This will be followed by the Autumn of War, which we can all safely assume will tackle the subject of warfare. We could speculate on what else needs to change, but that topic would be far too hefty and long to fit into this video. All that I know is despite its many flaws, Imperator Rome is a game that I enjoy, and I sincerely hope that the devs will continue in the same vein as the updates and changes they have brought since launch trying to fix the game. However, I do have some concerns, and my major concern is that if the future updates and DLC don't up the player count back to respectable levels and generate more interest in the game, Paradox won't see the game as financially viable and at some point pull the plug. This would be a shame because I've maintained from the start, and I still maintain that this game has enormous potential. The lack of interest and coverage can clearly be seen for the lack of content creators covering the game regularly. Unlike EU4, which has content creator giants such as Arumba and Quill18 cover the game, Imperator only has a few that really give the game any coverage, such as Lambert, Republic of Play to name a few, alongside myself, who are the only content creators giving the game regular coverage. This is not an attack on other content creators who are not playing the game, it's just a reflection on how the game has failed to shine compared to Paradox's other titles. It's understandable that if people don't enjoy the game and there's less people playing it, that it should not be covered as much as other titles. Another concern that I have that again relates to my concerns that Paradox might have put the game on the back burner, and this part may be quite controversial, but before you all get angry, just hear me out. On the 12th of December 2019, Johan Andersson, the game director for Imperator and a significant and important member of the studio for many years, decides to step back and pass the torch, so to speak, to Peter Nicholson, also known as Arheo, a relative newcomer who started off as content designer for Imperator. Now, I want to make something perfectly clear. This is not an attack on Arheo. I have absolutely no doubt that he's more than qualified for the job, and he's definitely more so than me. Let's not forget that Arheo is the man behind the food mechanics in Cicero and the differentiation between settlements and cities. Both are fantastic and much welcome changes to the game, but I just can't help feeling that when such an important figure like Kaiser Johann steps back as game director for Imperator, you just get the feeling that the game is not going to get the attention it needs in order to right the wrongs. You kinda get the feeling that Imperator was an experimental plaything by Paradox, which has not quite worked out as good as they hoped for, leaving a very disgruntled community with only a small player base for the game, which is more than likely way below the developers' expectations. If you told me that just over 1,600 average concurrent players exactly 1 year after launch was expected by the studio, and that they are happy with that, then you are lying to yourself. It is more probable, and I repeat probable, not certain, those two words are completely different things because this is after all speculation, as I do not have access to the inner workings of the studio, but it is probable that Paradox are disappointed with the way things have worked out for Imperator, and that the very fact that Johan has stepped away from the game could possibly mean that the studio's enthusiasm for the title has taken a bit of a hit. Now, I sincerely hope that Arheo and Johan prove me wrong, and that the game continues to receive the proper attention that is required to keep improving the game and bring people back, and that the decision to change game director will in due course be entirely justified. I still hope that Paradox will turn Imperator into the game it should have been at launch, and I feel that the game is currently at a crossroads. It will either fall out of existence within the coming year, keeping an insanely low player count, and the future release of Crusader Kings 3 is definitely not going to help it, by the way, forcing Paradox to progressively abandon the game, or the continued changes and updates brought by the dev team will continue to make the game into what it should be, bringing people back and increasing its player base. Considering the dedication that Paradox Interactive have for their games and the continued support in the long term of all their releases, my gut instinct tells me that you should not write off Imperator Rome just yet. You may be surprised at what might happen. One thing for sure is that I will continue to play it even though it has its flaws simply because I enjoy it. Well, that's it for this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, and please let me know what you think about Imperator and what the future holds for the game in the comments section below. With that said, I thank you all for joining me, and if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button. Anyway, I shall see you all later, and have a great day.